you like sci-fi, fantasy, action, adventure, and comic books? Then you've come to the right place for your weekly dose of anything and everything geek. So strap in and let's get this show on the road. Welcome to the Science Fictionary podcast.
Hello and welcome everybody to the Science Fictionary podcast, the podcast brought to you by ScienceFictionary.com, where we discuss all things in the world of sci-fi, fantasy, action, adventure, and superheroes in the world of pop culture. I am Daniel, and joining me tonight are Marisha.
Hey everybody.
And Andrew.
What's going on, everybody?
And David.
Hello.
All right. So if everybody caught Monday's episode, you know we are doing our Pillars of Science Fiction series. Last week was literature, and if you want to check out our entire list of that, you can check that out at sciencefictionary.com. And this week we are doing television. So this list might be a little shorter, y'all. I'm not sure we're gonna. We've probably all got the same four.
You know,
It's pretty close.
I made an effort to probably not have the same four, but I think there's one that's on everybody's list.
Oh yeah,
Probably two.
And maybe two. I got two that I don't think are going to be on anybody else's list unless they're on Marisha's.
There is one that I put only to go out of my way to try to have a little variety.
Yeah. Well, I have my like basic list, and then I have all the other things I'm going to talk about whenever you guys take all of my topics.
Well, you didn't. Marisha didn't get a chance to go first on any of the novels, so we'll have to let her jump in first on one of the shows. Yeah, but I just kind of want to this. If you didn't catch our episodes last week, we talked about the Pillars of Sci-Fi. We specifically talked about novels last week, and keep in mind these are not what we're saying are the greatest science fiction shows ever made, and the same with the novels. It's not that they're the best ever, or that they're even our favorites, but that these are what we feel that are the foundations of modern science fiction.
And that's what I was saying earlier, that we started last week's series with literature, so television. And actually, I do want Marisha's first because it's going to get interesting. And she struggled last week whenever we all had some of the same books she did. So,
all right. Well,
what have you got first, Marisha?
Okay. Well, I mean, there's only one right answer, right, to what is the most important sci-fi TV show ever. It's got to be Star Trek.
Yeah, the original series.
Without Star Trek, the original series, sci-fi is completely different. Everything is completely different. And I mean, not that there wasn't sci-fi before Star Trek, but
no, and there are things that inspired Star Trek, but it's probably the single most important piece of futurism ever written.
It's got to be. I mean, and like I said, this is clearly the one that everybody's got on their list, right? Does anybody not have Star Trek, the original series, on their list? No.
I just have Star Trek in general, but I mean, yeah, Star Trek, the original series.
That's right. I mean,
so I did not actually watch Star Trek, the original series until fairly recently. Whenever Andrew and I were dating, he decided I should see Stargate. And I made my own wedding dress, and so I spent 500 hours sitting in front of the TV, hemming and doing all that kind of stuff, watching Stargate. And so watched lots of Stargate, like 20 seasons of Stargate. And when I went back, and I finally went back and watched the original Star Trek, I was like, I mean, Stargate's totally a ripoff of this. I mean, and how many things do you sit down and watch? They seem, if you've never seen the original Star Trek, they seem so innovative and clever until you sit down and you're like, wait a second. Not only is like the concept, like this exact episode is a Star Trek episode.
Yeah. Stargate did some interesting things that do set it apart, in that you're seeing the evolutionary climb of humanity to a spacefaring race. But the tropes, it's definitely riffing on what Star Trek created.
So, and I know you're a big original and Next Generation fan, Daniel.
Yeah, and Star Trek is the first one on my list, and it's be the first one on all of our list. It is, like we already said, it's the most important. Andrew said it, the most important piece of futurism ever written. That was really the start of what we enjoy now in science fiction. That jump started all, and that show was not it. It got 3 seasons its original run, and that was it. It actually was going to be canceled after the 2nd season, and the fans saved it. That was one of the first big write-in campaigns to save a show, was for Star Trek to get a season 3. And unfortunately, season 3 actually isn't as strong as the first 2 seasons. But that was it. But it hit the magic number. At the time, it needed 72 episodes to be considered for syndication. And what that 3rd season did was get them to 72 episodes. And they were able to go into syndication, and that's where it found its footing. Reruns.
Yeah.
And we talked about it with Firefly the other day. This was the first show, really, that the fans would not let die.
Yep.
They started getting together in their costumes and going to these conventions, and they started inviting some of the actors to come to these conventions, and the conventions got bigger and bigger, and they decided they were going to revive the series. That never got off the ground, but as things progressed with that series turned into Star Trek: The Motion Picture.
And that's really not just it's the beginning of con culture, which has become a really big part of geekdom.
That's exactly right.
If there is no Star Trek, there are no Star Trek conventions. Then there is no Comic-Con, there is no any of it.
Right. There's no Star Wars Celebration. There's no
Yep.
So it is the most important science fiction television show ever created.
Everything, and not just sci-fi. Almost everything that I watch or read today, you can look at and say, "Oh, they took that from Star Trek," or "Oh, Star Trek did that first."
Yeah.
Star Trek did it better a lot of the times too.
It did it better. You're right. I've only recently gotten into Star Trek because of this podcast.
You're welcome.
Because of our series of reviewing it, which we're going to talk about some Star Trek later in the show, actually. And one of the great things about it is not only is it super influential, it is freaking great. It's awesome. It's an amazing series of shows and movies. I've thoroughly enjoyed watching it. It does, and it's probably established this. It is a show that, yes, it's science fiction, it's about the future, but it draws so much on real history, on modern times, on people, and it is truly timeless because of that. There will never be a point in human history where I don't think Star Trek will be relevant. I mean, going forward, you know what I mean? It's about people, it's about humans, and some of the best sci-fi is just about people and exploring humanity.
Yep.
Sci-fi's huge into doing that. So much sci-fi that I watch and that I read and hear and everything, it's all about that. It tackles those same themes that Gene Roddenberry tackled 50 years ago.
Yep.
He was a true visionary, completely ahead of his time. Star Trek is the kind of show that would be made today, but like with our, modern sensibilities and such, but it was made decades ago.
Yep.
And it did some incredible things. And you look back at some of the, maybe not the original series, but maybe like the Next Generation and other Star Trek shows, they look great. They are really high quality, amazing productions, and they establish a real bar. They have set the bar for what sci-fi should be.
And now I'm not gonna lie. I've been watching some of Star Trek's contemporaries this week. So we're watching something today, and they're going through like a meteor field, and Iana's going, "That's tinfoil. That is totally tinfoil. I can see it. It's in black and white." And my 10-year-old over there going, "That's tinfoil." So, That being said, although some of those sets are kind of laughable by today's standards compared to the tinfoil meteors that are also being lobbed at spaceships at the time. Star Trek was pretty impressive in the 60s.
It was.
You're right. It was impressive, and I can go back and I can watch it, and you can find all of our episodes of us talking about Star Trek. I praise it for its use of great looking practical effects, and that's another way of making it timeless. I mean, it showed us the future by using practical effects, and a lot of the times it looks better than using our quote unquote futuristic technology that we have right now.
Yep.
Andrew, do you have anything different for your number one?
Well, I mean, Star Trek is my number one. I as I said, I knew I tried to put things on my list that I didn't think everybody else would, that I still thought were important. But you can't make this list and not put Star Trek on it.
No, you can't. So we knew we'd all be in agreement about that one. And I'm going to keep going, though, with Marisha going first here. What's your number two?
My number two. Okay, so I'm going to pull something slightly less obvious than what's actually on my number two, because I'll let somebody else talk about that. So, like I said, I've been watching a lot of really old, weird stuff. And in spite of the fact that Captain Video and his Video Rangers is, as previously stated, it is no cornerstone of cinematic excellence. The fact remains, it is the daggum thing ran 6 days a week for years. 1,500 episodes. In fact, I don't even remember which president it was that decided he wanted his inauguration to be a half an hour later, because everybody was going to be tuning in to watch Captain Video and the Video Rangers, and he wanted them to switch the inauguration time so that he could, people would actually watch it.
That's great.
Okay, y'all, just like some random facts. $25 an episode for prop budget. Like I said, I mean, the show was one of the first examples, and this is something that's kind of become really important in sci-fi, is merchandising, right? We were talking about Spaceballs last night, so I have to bring that in there. Like the amount of merchandise that you could buy associated with this weird little show that ran for a half an hour every day is ridiculous. I mean, you could buy space helmets, you could buy little figures, you could buy all kinds of stuff. And so that was really the beginning of the TV merchandising machine.
Well, and it's the interesting thing about this show is it's kind of the transition point of science fiction from radio drama, from your daily radio drama to TV. That's why it was running every day. It was meant to compete directly with the radio.
Yep.
And it was geared towards kids.
Yep. At 1949 through 1955.
Yeah.
It was geared towards kids, but the interesting thing was they intentionally, when they realized what a large adult audience they had, they moved it to 7 o'clock so that adults would listen, so that adults could listen after they got home from work, because it was drawing such a large adult audience in addition to the kid audience. So
that's really cool.
Anyway, that is my weird and random second item on my list.
Captain Video and his Video Rangers.
Yes.
I had forgotten Captain Video even existed until we started this series.
Even Asimov wrote some episodes of Captain Video. Like, some really famous sci-fi names in sci-fi were writing episodes. So
I have one too that I think we're probably all going to have again, but I actually put Doctor Who on my list.
Yeah,
me too.
I probably am the only one that didn't put Doctor Who on my list. If I were to go 5 or 6 deep, I would put Doctor Who on there. And Doctor Who absolutely belongs in the top 4. And again, I didn't put it just for the simple sake of trying for our list to be more than 4 shows.
Something different, right?
Because the more I looked at this, I was like, our list could literally end up being 4 shows.
Yeah.
It could. And it really, to tell you the truth, maybe Captain Video belongs on there just because it was so early and it caught on so quick that it was the first, sci-fi television program with a lot of popularity. That probably should be 4 because we all know what our top 3 are going to be. Mm-hmm. I've got a 4th one I don't think anybody else is going to have. But Doctor Who, though, this show started in 1963. Mm-hmm. The original series ran for 26 seasons.
It's unreal.
26 seasons. Mm-hmm. And it is, I remember watching this show when I was a little kid. It would come on LPB, Louisiana Public Broadcasting. It was a PBS show, and it came on late at night. And I don't know how old I was, but I remember sitting there and watching it, and I remember watching it just because I thought it was weird. And it was like the most grown-up thing I could find to watch. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
This show is nuts. And I remember my daddy coming in one day and going, "Why are you watching Doctor Who?" And I'm like, "Is that what the name of this is?" I didn't know what this was. It's just cool, He's got this like magic wand thing, and it does everything. And what are these little pyramid shaped robots? Like this is wacky, mm-hmm. And I loved it. I was an 8-year-old kid sitting there, like I've said before, my exposure to being a geek or science fiction of any kind was Star Trek reruns and the 1960s Batman animated series. But mm-hmm. to a lesser degree, it was me staying up way later than I was supposed to, watching Doctor Who reruns on PBS also.
Wow.
And there are 13 doctors now. We have Jodie Whittaker, mm-hmm. right? The first female doctor.
Yeah.
And by the way, she's really good.
I watched the first Stephen Capaldi season. I have not watched it since then. Right. So I'm kind of behind on my Doctor Who.
Yeah, and this is a show, like I said, with a really weird history. It was actually meant to be an educational program. The idea was that the Doctor was a Time Lord, and he was going to take these ordinary people from present day, and the TARDIS was basically just going to be a device where we could examine science and historical events firsthand.
Mm-hmm. Magic school.
It was going to be. It was going to be an educational program. And it just kind of evolved into what it is now. Mm-hmm. The whole idea of the Doctor regenerating is because they lost the first actor that played the Doctor. They had to replace him. Well, how do we explain this? Well, maybe the Doctor he's basically immortal and he can just regenerate. They just came off the top of somebody's head.
Yep.
And it is a absolute...
It's an event in sci-fi.
It's
going to be the next Doctor.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Even people who don't watch Doctor Who.
And it's become such an integral part to the story itself.
Mm-hmm.
His regeneration and continuing to move forward with it. And it's incredible how this show just sort of stumbled into so many things that have made it great.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm kind of excited. I have not actually watched classic. Like I said, I found out that you can't watch classic Doctor Who for free anywhere, so I'm going to have to track somewhere down to pay for it. But I do have the Backyard TARDIS on Twitter. He sent me a list of must-watch Doctor Who episodes, so I'm going to have to go.
This guy might be our biggest fan.
Yeah, he had lots of really interesting things to say. So I'm excited to really get to dive into that whenever I have time to figure out a place to watch it. So that's going to be fun. Go watch some old sci-fi. My kids will really enjoy it, I think.
And I'll take the opportunity, though, to tell everyone who's listening that interact with us. We enjoy that.
Yeah, ask us questions. Tell us things.
If we start getting a bunch of them, I'm not going to promise you we can all respond to all of them. But,
some of us will respond to some of them.
Yeah. And you'll probably introduce us to stuff we hadn't thought of before.
Yeah.
And let us know what you like for us to talk about. So But anyway, Doctor Who, I think, definitely belongs on the list.
Yeah, I put it on my list, and I haven't seen a whole lot of Doctor Who. I've only seen the David Tennant Doctor Who, just because I was such a big fan of David Tennant.
He's my favorite Doctor.
He's my favorite too.
He is. I saw David Tennant on other things, and I ended up accidentally at a David Tennant panel at WisCon one year.
It was awesome.
And it was, you were there too. I didn't mean to be there. Like, I walked into the wrong panel, but I ended up staying because he was just so charming and awesome. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm a big fan of this guy, because I'd seen him on Jessica Jones at that point.
Right.
And so I gotta watch his Doctor Who stuff. And I love the show. I'd love to find the time to watch more. There's just so much of it. But really ended up on my list just because you're right. Like, so many seasons of the show. It is the only other franchise that I can think of that is like run for as long and as much would be Star Trek. Like, everything else,
and The Simpsons.
And The Simpsons, right? Continuously, but Star Wars. Like, so I'm talking about like TV shows,
right?
It won't go away. Everything else runs its course.
Yeah.
Every other sci-fi show runs its course. Doctor Who will not run its course.
Yeah.
They keep finding ways to get people to watch. It just has such a loyal fan base.
And you mentioned Star Trek. There's it ever since The Next Generation. For the most part, there's always been a Star Trek series on TV, with a couple of breaks. But 26 seasons of one series that the original Doctor Who got.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever. That's other than a soap opera. That's unreal.
Right.
That and The Young and the Restless.
No single Star Trek series comes close to even touching.
And it's become such an important cultural touchstone. I mean, it's, like I said, it's one of those things that even people who don't watch who've never watched the first episode of Doctor Who are familiar. They know what the TARDIS is. They know what a song. It's one of those things that kind of like even if you've never seen Star Wars, you know what a Jedi is. It's such it's one that I think it's really hard to make this list without putting it on there.
And it's such a cons are a great measurement stick for how influential something is. And at every single con, at every single booth, there are people that are selling scarves and they're
fezzes and bow ties.
Yep.
Exactly. Yes,
and you can always tell as soon as you walk in the door if one of the doctors is at the con.
Yeah.
Yep, because there will be a line wrapped around the building. I remember when what's his name? Matt Ryan? No, not Matt Ryan.
Matt Smith.
Matt Smith. I remember when he was there, he had a line that rivaled Stan Lee's.
Yeah.
Yep.
He was also great.
Yeah. Which just blew my mind. I had no idea somebody could be that popular.
Yep. Oh yeah.
People love him. People at my school. That's the thing. When you can keep getting new fans.
Yep.
There are people. When I was in high school, there were people who walked around wearing scarves only because of Doctor Who. They were weird and they got bullied. I feel sorry for them, but they walked around with scarves because and even though they were getting bullied, they did not take that scarf off because they were that proud to be a Doctor Who fan. And you know what? Good for them.
Yep. Well, and the other thing about Doctor Who is it has managed. TV shows don't always cross the pond real successfully. Right. Movies, you tend to see a much bigger international fan base, but not TV shows as much. But Doctor Who is the exception that proves the rule because it is such a big deal. There are definitely not that many British shows that are that popular in the US. But Doctor Who consistently managed to be one of the most popular other than Jane Austen adaptions, which has its own set of, weird devotees. Doctor Who managed.
You gotta go start your own Jane Austen podcast, as you bring her up way too much on this show.
Not too much. Jane Austen is the best, the very best.
Okay.
You get to talk about Batman. I get to talk about Pride and Prejudice.
This show was created solely so I could talk about Batman. That's why I said, go talk about the Jane Austen podcast on your Jane Austen podcast. All right. Anyway, y'all can tell Marisha and I love each other, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Like the brother I never had.
So anyway, that's Doctor Who.
Yep.
So, Andrew, what was next on your list, though?
Okay, so I again went earliest to latest. So at the top of my list, just because it's the oldest, is Tales of Tomorrow. Tales of Tomorrow is from 1951. It was one of the first anthology series. So it's the predecessor to
the other one on everyone's list.
The other one on everybody's list, which is going to be the Twilight Zone. Rod Serling called this the granddaddy of all sci-fi. Arthur C. Clarke wrote episodes of this. People that were in it, Boris Karloff, Cloris Leachman, Leslie Nielsen, Paul Newman, all people that were in this, they did renditions of Frankenstein, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. It was just this an incredible little show that, it ran for 85 episodes in 2 seasons. And it is literally it's really the inspiration for all of the anthology shows that came after. But unlike some of those, it was doing a lot of adapting classic sci-fi. So that's
interesting. Actually, that's something I need to know more about. So I'm glad you brought that one up.
And it came out what year?
1951.
Wow, that is definitely earlier than a lot of.
It's almost as old as you, Dad.
Almost.
Get it?
Okay. David, do you have something different?
Yeah, so I do have something different. So I don't know if we want to go ahead and get into Twilight Zone or just save Twilight Zone for next. Because, you were right, Andrew.
We can go ahead and talk about all of our list. We can go ahead and talk about Twilight Zone.
You know what? I'll go ahead and say my one weird one, and then we'll get into so that way we can save Twilight Zone for the next. And while we're on me, I'll get into my weird one. This one was just one, and it's not the right answer for what is in the top. But when I'm thinking of what is different, and when you're thinking about what inspires, what is popular and still big today, some of the biggest sci-fi shows are animated shows, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And for an example, Rick and Morty is one of the biggest shows in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody talks about it. So I looked back and I actually put on my list Futurama as a pillar, just for it being probably the biggest and best animated sci-fi show. They make. Oh, what? I saw an eye roll.
No, it's not an eye roll. But I do have. See, I've got an animated series on mine as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I love Futurama. Futurama is one of my favorite series of all time. But I do have a. They're different, but I do have an animated series.
Really?
From
interesting.
Bring it up then. Let's have that discussion comparing them here real quick.
Okay, so
wait, do we want to let David finish talking, given his Futurama?
Yeah, let David finish talking about that, and then I'll bring mine in.
I'll just quickly say Futurama is hilarious, and I tried to research what was the first animated sci-fi show, and I couldn't find an exact answer, so I just had to pick what I thought was probably the most influential as an animated sci-fi show, and I feel like it's Futurama. Every science fiction based animated show that is around out there that are big, like Rick and Morty, like Gravity Falls, they all, you can look at it and say, oh, you're taking your influences from Futurama, and they probably wouldn't exist without it.
Yeah.
And
I do really like Gravity Falls too.
Yeah,
Gravity Falls is great.
It seems like the style of humor has been really influential in
It's kind of like, we talked about when I put Hitchhiker's Guide on my list for the novels. That's
exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Was like in the sort of the same way that you had Hitchhiker's Guide on your list, I thought Futurama at least deserved a mention.
Absolutely.
Just for its style of comedy mixing with the sci-fi, the dark sci-fi humor. Because sci-fi can get pretty dark, and it jokes about that, and lots of shows today you still feel that same style of humor that I couldn't find, at least that I know of, an earlier example of before Futurama, and it's still popular today, and it's still talked about, and just Rick and Morty alone is one of the most popular shows that is out today. Rick and Morty's an event, and Rick and Morty would not exist without Futurama.
Yep.
So what was your show, Andrew?
Okay, so I've actually got the Jetsons on my list.
I considered the Jetsons. I thought about that actually, because I know it was sooner, but when it came to just that style of comedy, I chose Futurama. But I did think about that.
I would say that prior to Star Trek The Next Generation, Star Trek The Original Series, that the Jetsons, before Star Trek, the Jetsons was the most important piece of futurism on TV. We had done lots of alien invasions and monster movies and lots of that kind of stuff. But the Jetsons was one of the first pieces that really took this look and look, what would life look like? What's life going to look like 100 years from now? And got a lot of things right.
Yeah.
When you start looking at a lot of the technology and stuff you got right now, of course, it's still like Star Trek, the original series. It's very much a product of its time in that people are, it came out in 1962 and, basically you're in the future, but people still, I guess, gender roles of 1962, but in the future.
Right.
It didn't. But as far as like the technology and stuff that it envisioned, I mean, a lot of those things are things that we do. We're literally doing one of them right now. We're sitting here looking at each other and talking, and that was the Jetsons.
2 hours away from each other. Right,
and so and things like flying cars. I mean, they're just not that far off. And in fact, I think the technology is probably there. It's do we really turn people loose with this technology sort of thing?
Right.
Yeah.
So I have the Jetsons on my list just because I think it is a critical piece of futurism.
That's a great point, and I'm inclined to agree with you.
I just couldn't do it. At the end of the day, that's still very much I don't know. I mean, like David mentioned Futurama. Yes, animated. But at this point, do we really make a distinction between animated and a cartoon?
Yeah, but let's be honest, though. In 1962, really up until the end of the 60s, almost all science fiction was geared towards kids. With Star Trek, Doctor Who, The Outer Limits, some of those being the exceptions to the rule. And so I don't think we can eliminate something because it's primarily geared towards children, because the children that grew up watching that
are the ones who went on to create the next generation of.
And there's still lot of sci-fi that is geared towards children.
You make good points. You make good points. I have no problem with it. I love the Jetsons. I just didn't consider it for this, but I have no issue with it whatsoever.
Yeah. No, I mean, I can certainly see why it wouldn't be on everybody's list, but I do think it's an important piece of futurism.
Yeah, there's that. What I think of when you say Jetsons, I don't know if y'all have been to Epcot, but there's that ride at Epcot, the big, the big dome at Epcot.
Yeah.
At Disney. I forget what the ride is called, but it's literally like Jetsons the ride, and it's all about like what's your future gonna be like. Do you know what I'm talking about, Marisha?
I haven't been to Epcot.
No.
At least not since I was like
it's all
10.
about like futurism.
Right.
It is a celebration of futurism,
Mm-hmm.
and there's actually like literally at the end you get your own little Jetsons cartoon about what your future is going to be like.
Yeah, that's
So when you
great.
make that good point of inspiring futurism and exploring what the future is going to be like, which a big part of sci-fi is that,
Mm-hmm.
you're right. The Jetsons really does take a really one of the first things to take a good look at that
Mm-hmm.
and think about what it'll actually be like. And you're right, they got a lot of things correct. And just the way that we live our lives probably won't change that much. It's just the technology making it all more convenient.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I'm ready for that robot maid to do my dishes and my laundry. I'm just saying.
Now, I am going to say that thing short-circuited a lot.
That's true.
Yeah.
You got kids for that.
Well,
At least that's what my mom thinks.
I've got one. Before we get to the last one that we know we've all got, another one that's kind of off the wall, I'm not sure anybody else has, is The Prisoner. Another piece of British television. I see Andrew looking. You remember The Prisoner?
I do. And I that one didn't cross my mind, but it's a good one.
Mm-hmm. That was, just because at the time that was made, there hadn't been anything like it before. It's sci-fi, but it was a type of sci-fi that were really this mind-bending, what the hell is going on around here kind of science fiction. And it was, like I said, it was groundbreaking for what it was at the time. Nobody had ever done anything like that before. So I do have The Prisoner, just because that was one of the first shows that always kept you guessing, and there was always some kind of twist, and every time you thought you had that show figured out, you were wrong. Not a whole lot to say about it, but just that's why I have The Prisoner. If anybody hasn't checked The Prisoner out, go watch it. Watch it all the way to the end. And at the end of that series, you will either just be amazed and gratified and satisfied and get it, or you will throw something at your TV. Right. So check that one out. So Marisha, back to you again. Have we run up into the point that the only thing left is the last show we've all got?
Well, we haven't let David. Have we let David do one first yet?
No, we've done all three because I had Star Trek, I had Doctor Who, and I said Futurama. So
Okay. Well, I'm going to pull something else out other than the obvious third answer, just for the sake of expanding the conversation a little bit, because sci-fi is one of those things that has sub-genres, right? Sub-genres out the wazoo. So we kind of touched on the space opera in the, at least, with our conversation about Captain Video and his Video Rangers. Bless it. So one that I actually wasn't familiar about until I started kind of doing a little bit of research is Kolchak the Night Stalker from 1974.
Oh, gosh, I love Kolchak.
I've never seen it, but it kept coming up as something that was inspirational for the X-Files. Is that sort of like the man, researching the weird and strange and unexpected. So since y'all have seen it, why don't y'all talk about it a little bit? Because I just sort of thought that it belonged on the list, but I didn't really know much about it, and I didn't have time to watch it. So take it away.
Well, Kolchak was just, like you said, that was like the first show I can think of it's like he was a private investigator into the paranormal.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which I guess we hadn't seen before. And it's Darren McGavin. Everybody knows Darren McGavin, right? Y'all remember Darren McGavin?
Yep.
Marisha, you know who we're talking about?
I see his picture on the internet.
Kid. Christmas Story.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it only ran for one season, though. It was one of those shows that didn't really catch its following. Like, it's the kind of thing that would work now way better than it worked then. But yeah, like you said, Chris Carter absolutely calls it. I mean, it's a tremendous influence to the X-Files. He openly admits that.
And the X-Files is something that has itself spawned a lot of that kind of paranormal investigation genre. And so I think that it deserves, some mention as the sort of founder of that branch of sci-fi.
There were a couple of TV movies that ran in a couple of years before they did the series.
Okay.
But yeah, it was definitely different at the time. That's a good one. It doesn't get the credit it deserves. It was so short. It only got like 20 episodes.
Yeah. So that's definitely one I'll have to go back, add that to the I found a lot of things to add to the list of things that I'm going to have to go back and watch now.
Right. Good show. I'm proud of you for that one, Marisha. That's good. I like that. All right. So, Andrew, is that down to me and you? Do you have anything other than the one we know is coming?
I do, but I think it really probably should just be mentioned alongside the one that we're going to talk about, because the other one that I have on my list, and it was intentional that I put this one instead of the one I'm sure you're going to name, is The Outer Limits.
Yeah, and I'm right with you there. But the Twilight Zone makes the list, and The Outer Limits just gets bumped because the Twilight Zone's a superior show. But your point is, you feel like Outer Limits stuck more strictly to traditional.
Outer Limits is pure science fiction.
It is.
So, but I'm not saying that I'm not in any way discounting Twilight Zone. Twilight Zone is the better series. But they did run concurrently for 2 years as direct competitors.
Well, they did. And the truth is, the revamped Outer Limits series that ran in the 90s is the superior show to the original Outer Limits, too.
True.
That show was fantastic.
I have resisted putting X-Files on my list because I have, on this show, called X-Files the greatest science fiction TV show ever created, next to Star Trek. But certainly within the genre of sci-fi, when we're not talking space adventure stuff, it is the best sci-fi show ever created, and at least for in my opinion. But I resisted the urge to put it on my list because I know that it was built on the backs of other things, and I didn't want to put it on the list just because it's my favorite.
Yeah,
right. And I have some issues with that as well. I did, like, in our literature series, I put the Barsoom series on the list, but I can get away with that because it's not my favorite sci-fi novel.
Yeah,
but it is one of my favorites, and it does still belong on the list we put it on.
But anyway, I think the thing right now though is I think we're all kind of down to Twilight Zone.
Yeah, exactly.
It's got to be Twilight Zone.
Yeah. When I was making my list, and I've actually despite you might not think this, I've seen a lot of the Twilight Zone, even because I just knew about how incredible apparently the show was. I've watched a lot of the Twilight Zone, seen a lot of the classic episodes, and when I was going to put on my list, I did kind of run into the same issue that Andrew did of there is a lot of, it's not strictly sci-fi, but I did put it on my list because some of the episodes are some of the most classic pieces of television I've ever seen. They tackle some of the most amazing themes and in such a good way, which sci-fi is so important for doing, is tackling different ideas, different questions, different themes. And the Twilight Zone did that with every episode. And also just how influential it is. I'm loving watching the X-Files. Watching the X-Files, I'm realizing that it's very much inspired by the Twilight Zone, the wacky, the weird, everything like that. The modern shows today that are the most popular, probably the most popular sci-fi show today is Stranger Things, I guess, because Stranger Things is extremely popular, and that show does not exist without shows at the Twilight Zone. Tackling the weird, tackling the strange, and exploring questions, and the Twilight Zone is just the king of doing that, which is one of the most important aspects of sci-fi, is asking questions about the weird and taking a dive into what that is like. and solving mysteries and seeing how science can kind of influence our real lives, and the Twilight Zone's the king of doing that.
Yep. The One-Armed Bandit, that's the name of that creepy episode. Oh. Not a slot machine chasing him around. Not a fan. But yes, in the Twilight Zone, it's like it's one of those things. It's like you read through lists and lists of 50 greatest sci-fi shows ever, 20 of the best sci-fi shows ever on TV, and at the top 3 in all of those lists is Doctor Who, Twilight Zone, and Star Trek.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're right.
It's just it's so, even though some of it has not aged particularly well, some of it just comes off a little weird now. It's so iconic, so much. I mean, if I had $1 for every book that I have read that has used a Twilight Zone episode as an illustration for a point that they were making, I could fund this show. It's so universally important, culturally.
Yeah. I've heard the joke, what is this, a Twilight Zone episode?
Right.
So many times.
Yeah.
And everything. I'm sure the MCU's made that joke before, I'm pretty sure. So
just something weird happens and somebody goes do 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 do.
Yeah, the song.
Yes.
The song. And yeah, it tackles that weird and it's a great. You're talking about the sci-fi subgenres. It's amazing at that sci-fi horror element. When we talk about the movies section of the part of this, I'm going to talk a little bit about the entire subgenre of sci-fi horror, and the Twilight Zone is once again the king of doing that. Of saying you have shows like Star Trek, which kind of celebrates science and celebrates the potential of all that stuff, but then you have shows like the Twilight Zone that say hey, what if it all
went to crap?
Yeah.
What if it all went to crap? And what if technology got so advanced that it took over the world? And that reminds me, shows like Black Mirror today.
Yeah.
It's the Twilight Zone. There's that new Twilight Zone remake.
Is it any good? I have not actually watched it. I haven't intended to.
I have not even watched it. It looked really great. I just haven't had a chance to watch it.
It had an awesome trailer, that launch trailer during the Super Bowl was amazing. Exactly.
It was incredible. So it's still that those themes that are still tackled today so often, probably a little too much. It's probably too often we hear, what if science was really bad and we all died?
But the other thing about the Twilight Zone is that it was sometimes the way things were approached, but it dealt with a lot of the same issues that Star Trek did a few years later.
Yeah. Yeah.
It dealt with racism and out of control governments and war, and
there's a little bit of a proving ground for some of those concepts that sci-fi would really later riff on.
Right. But just like David was pointing out, when shows like Star Trek would deal with those issues and show the future of those issues in a positive way, Twilight Zone would go out of its way sometimes to show you, if we keep going down this path, this is how stupid this shit's going to get.
Yeah, but Star Trek did it in a way that was always interesting, in that it's we've got our stuff together, us, people of Earth, but but then you see the way they relate to other groups, and it's
other races who are still dealing with it,
right, and so or even within Starfleet, with Kirk's issues with the Klingons, it's and David talked about this last week with First Contact, where is it Lily?
Yeah,
is telling Picard is we're more advanced than that, and she says bullshit.
Yeah,
yep, exactly.
We're more advanced than going after revenge because we're not about those primitive things. She's no, that's human nature, and you're right. Star Trek is very good at still even though showing things in a positive light, not shying away from human nature and the idea that we're not going to change. And the Twilight Zone also did that. Twilight Zone is another great example of sci-fi talking about just humans and human nature and stuff like that. There's so many classic episodes I can think of that are just all about exposing the ugliness of humans through science fiction.
Yeah. I was reading that apparently Rod Serling got tired of his concepts being rejected for being too political or, making too many social, too much social commentary. So he just decided to do it in sci-fi so people would leave him alone. And it worked.
That's great. That's great. And that's why sci-fi is so important.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so that is our TV list for our pillars of science fiction. And I guess the takeaway from that is our big three, basically Star Trek, Twilight Zone, and Doctor Who, right?
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. With a lot of other well-deserved series mentioned. But we're going to also tonight, before we get off, talk about Star Trek Insurrection, the third movie in the Next Generation era of Star Trek films. First time David's seen it, and I think, Marissa, did you say it's the first time you've seen this one?
Yeah, I've never seen this one.
Okay. And what'd you think?
I liked it.
I liked it?
I liked it. You didn't like it?
It's okay.
It's okay. I mean, I kind of... Okay, and I'm not going to lie, like, the stretchy skin people, that was creepy. I couldn't, Salieri with the stretchy skin. It's just a bit much.
Can I point this out real quick before you go any further? Because you mentioned the stretchy skin people, okay? Is it not hilarious to you that our vision... that at the time that movie was made, the vision of the future for people trying to look younger was to stretch their skin out the way they did in that show, all creepily and just with the machines. And we actually have facelifts now, like actual plastic surgery, where you can do it so much better than what we thought the way we'd be doing it 200 years from now.
Yeah.
Like 20 years ago, we thought 200 years from now we were doing it this way. We've already got a better way to do it. I just think it's hilarious.
Yeah.
But anyway, continue.
I mean, it was not... I mean, I wouldn't say that it was like the best Star Trek movie or anything, but I mean, it was... I enjoyed it. We got to see Crusher and Troy, kind of doing a little bit more than we had gotten to see them in previous episodes. And we got to see some more great data. Now, of course, he left the emotion chip at home. Why did he leave the emotion chip at home? I didn't quite get that. I thought the emotion chip was merged to his neural net, and that's why he didn't just take it out before. I guess they figured it out.
Yeah, right. He didn't want to be... The plot needed him to. That's a valid point. In the plot, though, the idea is that he did not want to be dealing with the inconsistencies of the emotion chip while he was away from
his friends,
the crew.
That makes sense, yeah.
He was off doing something else. That's just another added thing into the equation we don't need to be fooling with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But anyway.
So what about you, David? What did you think of the movie?
Well, I have a question real quick, because obviously I wasn't alive when this movie was made. At the time this movie was made, was there something going on in some part of the world about relocation that some activists were really passionate about?
Not really. It's always kind of a thing.
I know. I mean, they literally reference the Trail of Tears. I know. I'm just okay. So I was wondering if either there was that, or if there was just somebody on staff who was really upset about the Trail of Tears, because that was the kind of the focus, and that's okay. You should be, but I just thought it was kind of okay. I need to start over. So I think whenever you said it was okay, that's kind of my exact reaction to Insurrection. I did enjoy it for the characters. I love seeing Riker and Troy sort of do a little bit more and
Finally,
which I was waiting the whole show for, but that's great. I do enjoy that. I really didn't really like Picard in this movie. Something about him felt off. I think they kept trying to mention that like the youthfulness thing of the planet was kind of
affecting them all.
affecting them a little bit. So it just kind of was weird. But I don't know. Okay, my thoughts are all over the place. I kind of just couldn't care less. You know what I mean? Because we're coming off of Generations where you have Picard and Kirk meeting, and the fate of the world. This whole planet could be destroyed, and the entire Enterprise explodes, and all the crew dies, and then you go into Contact, where the stakes have never been higher. All of Earth is completely taken over by the Borg, and they have to go back in time, and it's epic and high stakes and action packed and hilarious. And then you get this movie, and it's
just sort of there.
It's just like, oh, okay, so they're gonna save. I just I couldn't care less.
Yeah, it was kind of like you didn't have a big idea. You just really wanted to make a Star Trek movie.
It feels like
Andrew
just an
said,
episode.
When we reviewed Generations, Andrew said it might be the most forgettable Star Trek movie. What'd I say? She ain't seen Insurrection. It really does. It honest to God feels like they had a leftover script,
like a 2-part episode. Yeah,
they had a leftover script in the series and decided to make it. That's what this is. You could have thrown this into season 7 of Star Trek: The Next Generation, and it would have felt like it belonged there.
And that's that's an excellent point. Movie. Well, because I was thinking it. Like I said, I enjoyed it. I liked it, but it definitely feels a lot more like a Star Trek story arc than it does like a Star Trek movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a throwaway movie. Mm-hmm. I don't know how else to say it.
It explores.
I can take it or leave it. Yeah.
It explores some ideas, but it's like a storyline. It's like, let's talk about what's going on over here. There were some aspects of the movie I did enjoy. I liked Riker taking charge of the Enterprise. Mm-hmm. I didn't like him without the beard. Wasn't a fan of that, but I do love the part. I love the part where he says "smooth as an android's bottom," and Data is like, "What are you talking about?" And then like 2 minutes later, he touches his face and then he shakes his head no. And I took that as him saying, "No, this isn't as smooth as my butt." That's what I took that as. So I did enjoy that. I think the idea with Riker and Troy is that because they're on this planet, they're more youthful, so they're being all flirty and more.
Let's just call it what it is. I'm gonna say this on the show that they were horny like teenagers.
Yeah,
that was the point of it.
Yes, that's what I was thinking. Which that's good for them. So I do like seeing them, flirt.
And just call it what it is.
I did like them doing that. They were kind of youthful and like, ooh, I got my energy back. Let's flirt. And remember when we were younger and we were together and that kind of thing.
It sticks though. We see later on that it does. It
does stick. Yeah, I know that they're married in Picard, and I only know that they're together in Picard because I watched the cooking video on how to make that pizza that he makes. Really good in Picard.
Yeah,
but
pretty good.
So that was spoiled for me, but whatever. I do like the beginning of the movie. I do like it a lot. I love the jumping in and the mystery. You don't know what's going on. Mm-hmm. You see Data and he's gone rogue, and you see like Federation people who are telling him to stop, and he's not. So the wheels are turning. Was he hacked, or is this just him being Data? Mm-hmm. And he's right. Trying to stop. He's right. See something going wrong. The wheels are turning. But then he's not. He's firing at Picard. So okay. So and you see the damage on his neck. So you're thinking, okay, so he probably was like damaged somehow. But then you find out later that, yes, he was damaged, but what happened is all that was working was the right and the wrong. So that's really cool. I do like all of that. I actually love the scene when Worf and Picard are trying to catch Data, and Picard starts singing that song.
Right. From HMS Pinafore. That's
great.
epic. Yeah.
I thought that was really, really funny and really great. And then you get Data.
Right.
Once again, I love the first half of this movie a lot, actually, because I do love the mystery and finding out what's going on. I think it all kind of falls apart whenever it's just the weird skin people are angry, and so they want the planet to themselves. But then I'm confused because if they want the
it's a big planet.
It's a big exactly.
Can't they just live on the other side of the planet?
And oh, by the way, it gets even crazier whenever you figure out these are actually the children of the people who still live there.
Right.
Dumbass, just go home.
Yeah, but you can't always go home.
They were exiled?
Okay, I don't care. You cannot tell me everybody who left that planet as a young person has now been gone for so long that they're willing to kill their own parents to get they just want because what is home without the family anyway?
It's a place where you can live forever.
They want revenge, I think. They want revenge because they were exiled.
They want to live forever.
But then I'm confused because the Federation is trying to help these people because they need allies after their losses from the Borg. Okay, it makes sense. But if these are only the children, then what is it gonna? Is it like 600 people?
Well, no, they're going to use that energy, that fountain of youth energy they're harvesting. And that is one of the things that I thought was interesting about this movie is this is the first time you start to really see those kinks in the moral armor of Starfleet. Like they're really making questionable moral decisions. Because I know a lot of people complained about Picard, like Starfleet was never like that. Starfleet was always upstanding, but we definitely
either.
No, there were always little bits of people in Starfleet pulling slightly questionable things. I mean, even in the Next Generation, they did that some.
But this isn't just a random person. He's got like clearance. He's not going rogue.
Right, but I think what Daniel's saying is I think you see some of that in Deep Space Nine as well.
Oh, okay. I haven't seen Deep Space Nine, so yeah.
Oh, okay. That is cool, and you're right, man. I do enjoy that. I did like that, and then having to see Picard stand up to it. You know, I'm on his side. Like he's right. You can't. I love the use of history in Star Trek of him saying some of the darkest times of our history were about relocating a small group of people to benefit the many. And you're right. So I guess I don't know. It's just a weird. The plan kind of falls apart when you think about it, but it kind of hinges on. Okay, well, there was that one guy who's the leader who honestly just wanted revenge for being exiled in the first place.
Right.
But then did they ever even get into why? I know that they were exiled because they tried to take over. They tried to take over, but why were they trying to take over?
They left voluntarily.
They left voluntarily?
Yes.
I thought it said that they were exiled. Maybe I missed it because I was so bored by it that I stopped thinking about it for a second.
You know,
that is a real possibility.
The biggest thing about this movie, there definitely are some just obvious logical solutions to these problems that if you just like, okay, find another continent. You don't even have to find another, I mean, you can find a whole other continent. You don't even have to make another city. Just go somewhere altogether different. So there are definitely some places you have to just suspend logic because otherwise you don't have a story.
Right. And that's the thing. I like the mystery at the beginning. And then you find the hologram and okay, they're trying to relocate them, but without them even knowing they were relocated. But then it's like, well, when you find out what's going on, I think to myself, why did they even care in the first place about these people finding out they were being relocated?
That was Starfleet. That was Starfleet's. We don't want.
Oh, that was okay. You're right. Okay. Yeah. Now that you're mentioning, you're right. That was Starfleet's whole thing. Because then once that fell apart, the guy was like, "Screw it, just do it like this." Okay, right. I feel you. But also, I do like how that came back in the end. That they did set some things up that in the end came back in a pretty satisfying way.
Yeah.
Where they pulled that same plan on them and beamed them without them even knowing, which I didn't realize was a thing. So that was kind of weird to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like the idea that you can beam people, like this whole thing kind of relied on you being able to beam people to a different place without the people knowing they are being beamed.
Yeah.
Is that like a previously established
I don't think so.
idea?
Is that? No.
I guess though that I mean you can feel the effects of the transporter beam, but once the effects of the beam passed, if nothing around you had changed, you would just chalk it up as a
You know
weird
what? You're right,
Mm-hmm.
because there was that moment where there was that big flash, and they were like, "What was that?"
I am going to back up a little bit too. It's been so long since I actually watched the whole movie. I forgot y'all are right. They were exiled. They wanted to use technology when the elders didn't,
Mm-hmm.
and they tried to seize power. And they were exiled for some reason. It has
My question was, why were they exiled? What did they do? And now, okay, they wanted to
They
use
wanted to
technology.
embrace the use of technology.
Okay,
Right.
so then, but then they got old, and I guess the idea is they were used to the idea that they weren't ever going to get old.
Right.
So when they started getting old, they started using that space stretchy stuff to be young again. But then also some of them had like just other random modifications. So
Mm-hmm.
did they? So I guess they were doing that also just for fun because it was all about body modification in general.
Maybe.
So is this a movie about body modification, or is it about relocating people? Which
So,
isn't. I mean, like, is that a thing? I mean, I guess it's kind of a thing now that we still have to deal with. Like that still happens to people. I
Yeah.
guess. Not that I know a whole lot of.
I mean, it doesn't happen to people like right here,
Right.
where we're at, but yeah, in parts of the world, definitely, you see
Yeah,
large groups of people being displaced.
there's a whole refugee crisis, everything like that. Right. You're
Mm-hmm.
right. Um, so that's why I was asking though, if there was something like big with that going on at the time, like
Yeah,
when there was
there were in some places in the world
okay,
during the 90s.
okay, that's what I was asking about earlier because I just
right,
really
but
wasn't
what he
sure.
was at, I mean, there wasn't like a big global like uproar about one particular
Yeah. Well, it kind of
relocation.
reminded me in that like during the journey home, how I mentioned like there was somebody on staff really passionate about the
Whales,
whales,
yeah.
and it's that same thing. This is a bit more, um, you really shouldn't do this to people, and I do like that theme, and I do like Picard standing up for that and
Mm-hmm.
saying like it doesn't matter that it's only 600 people.
It's still
These are
wrong.
600 people. I did enjoy the idea they explored that these 600 people, they just assumed they were like primitive, like cavemen, basically.
Right.
And then they meet them and they're like even more advanced.
Mm-hmm.
And they're so advanced that they've realized that they don't even want the technology because they came from a place where all that technology like ruined their all the technology in the war and the weapons ruined their world.
Mm-hmm.
And so they came here and they're like, yeah, I know what warp drive is. Don't talk to me like I'm an idiot. I know what a
Right.
hologram is. I
Yeah.
just choose. This is hard for you to believe, but I wanted to eat food that didn't come out of a machine or a replicator. And like, I wanted to live a life that
Mm-hmm.
didn't involve like screens of technology. And guess what? I'm still happy. Crazy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I didn't need a freaking holodeck to go outside and explore the wilderness. I just did it. And they're like, what? And they just couldn't the idea that the Federation just couldn't wrap their heads around that.
Yep.
That well, if they're not using technology, they must be cavemen.
Right.
And so I do like that idea, and I do like some of the characters on the planet. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I don't even remember the name of the species, um, but I do like some of the characters. You had Picard have a little romance. I'm going to go ahead and assume that that woman never shows up again.
Seems like
Um,
a safe assumption.
just like in the journey home when Kirk has that romance and then that woman never shows up again.
Mm-hmm.
There are some parts of the movie that I enjoyed. I really did. I mean, I'm always going to enjoy it. I do love the whole idea of, at the beginning of the movie, you're setting up that Picard's too busy to take any detours. but then he hears Data's in trouble.
Right.
And he's taking a detour.
Right.
I
Obviously.
always love that about this show. But there were some parts that I really did enjoy.
But altogether, not the best.
Altogether. Oh, my favorite part. I really do. I'm a big fan of Troy's dyed hair. I think it looks better than ever. I'm a supporter.
So no, but I would enjoy it just fine. Like I said, as an episode of the series, as a Star Trek movie, it is the most forgettable Star Trek movie. Like I'm not even sure. I think there are Star Trek fans who don't. They go, well, there are only 3 Next Generation movies, right? No, dude, there are 4. This is Insurrection. Oh yeah, I forgot about that one. Like I have those conversations. Like it's just sort of there.
Not bad.
I think you like it better than I did, David, to be honest with you.
I found some enjoyable parts in it. But I really did have to kind of dig for that. What did I enjoy about this?
Yeah.
It's probably I don't know.
think
I
it's
gotta
a
wait.
beautiful
I gotta
shot
wait
film.
till we get. I gotta wait till we get to next week before I really decide to talk about what is my least favorite Star Trek movie.
Oh
Because-
god, you've been
For
hyping
different
up
reasons, though. I have issues with both of these last 2 films for different reasons.
Is Nemesis the last movie?
Look, Andrew's rolling his eyes at me.
Yeah, Nemesis is the last Next Generation film, and then we'll have the 3 Kelvin films.
Yeah, which I said something about how much I liked them on the internet the other day, and was informed how wrong I was, and I still like them.
What?
The first Kelvin movie.
Who told you were wrong for that?
A random person.
A random internet person.
That's what the internet's good for. People being like, "I like this thing."
He
You're wrong.
he wrote a novel about why she was wrong. So,
but I still think I'm right. I still like it. So it'll be interesting to get David's take on it.
The internet is literally just that scene in Pulp Fiction where he turns around and says, "You gotta have an opinion," then he shoots him. That's the internet. You gotta have an opinion, but then you get shot.
right.
Yeah, it's true.
Can we have a whole podcast episode about Pulp Fiction? It's not science fiction. It's just
It's action adventure, though.
It's true. Yeah, it's on our list.
I don't know.
Hey, Uma Thurman. I have a Pulp Fiction poster hanging right next to me. Hey, Uma.
Anyway,
We're
gonna. And on that note, we're gonna shut it down. So that's the time we got while David talks to his picture of Uma Thurman. But until next time, Marisha, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me at princessesandpadawans.com. I am on Instagram at princesses_and_padawans. And I am ppadawans on Twitter.
And Andrew?
Okay, you can find me running the Twitter account for this show at sci_fictionary. You can drop us a line at thesciencefictionary@gmail.com. You can, of course, find us at thesciencefictionary.com. And you can find us, as well as the rest of our Red 5 family, at red5network.com. And you can find my Twitch channel at darklighter580.
And David?
All right, you guys can find me on Twitter and Instagram at stay_creativedd. And you guys can find me on my YouTube channel, Creative D&D.
All right, and I am Dan C. Peeps on Twitter, and we'll see you next time.